Welcome to Confessions of an Early Career Researcher, the show where we deep dive into the journeys, challenges and successes of ECRs. Whether you're just navigating the early stages of your career or you're a more seasoned ECR, this is the podcast for you. Join us as we speak with ECRs at varying stages of their careers to discuss their experiences and unpack their academia survival tips. I'm your host, Leonie Smith, a philosopher and lecturer at Lancaster University. And today's episode is all about the question of what is an ECR? So welcome to the podcast. I've got two guests with me. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves in just a second. I thought I'd start by asking you to say who you are, where you are in your ECR journey, and maybe a bit about how you got there. So maybe, Berşin, if we start with you.
Hello, my name is Burçin Başkurt. I'm from Istanbul, Turkey. I've been living in the UK in the past 7 years now. Currently, I'm a senior lecturer at the University of East London in the Psychology and Human Development Department. I'm working in the master's program called Applied Positive Psychology. And my journey as an ECR and as an early career researcher started when I got my PhD in Istanbul in social and organizational psychology. Then I immediately started working as a lecturer in several higher education institutions in Istanbul. Then my husband got a job offer in London, and then with our little daughter, we moved to London. I thought it's going to be very easy for me to find a job here in the UK. Given that I had my PhD, some sort of teaching experience and research publications, but it didn't happen like that. I spent quite some time trying to understand and navigate through the UK education system and trying to understand what's going on in higher education institutions. I did a lot of job applications, but I never got a response. So I took a totally different lens to navigate myself in the system. I said, I need to be in this network, but maybe I should do another master's. So why not use this opportunity? A door is shut, but another is just opened. Maybe I can learn new things and improve my skills and everything. So I ended up at the University of East London doing another master's after my PhD. So yeah, I'll tell about the rest of the story.
Okay. So not the kind of traditional idea people have of exactly how smoothly the path from doing a PhD to starting in your career goes, with a few twists and turns on the way, which we'll get into in a minute. That's so fascinating. And Deo, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi. So I'm going to use a different kind of introduction so you can know a little bit more about me. And this is in line with the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. So I am Deo. I am a wife, a mom, a person of faith. And my, my identity, is people who have joy, and so like to dance and sing, and as part of that trying to transform the world, and maybe that's connected to what my name means, which means that I bring joy. And my position then is that I am a lecturer of politics and policy at Lancaster University, and my journey to an ECR, or my journey as an ECR, is one which sort of after my second master's degree, I took about 8 to 9 years working, so outside of academia. And then I came back to do a PhD, which is interesting in and of itself. I've got degrees in multiple fields, economics, management psychology, one of them, and then a PhD in politics. And I self-funded my PhD as well, which is an interesting experience. Very hard. I will not recommend. I'll stop there for now. But yeah.
Just to give us the sort of insight to it. So yet again, not this idealized version of, an ECR goes to university, does an undergrad, a master's, PhD, maybe does a postdoc, straight into lecturing. You've had all kinds of little breaks in between. And what I find interesting is you both mentioned doing different master's degrees at different points. So you've had these kind of very different experiences and maybe interdisciplinary experiences as well. So there's a few things that I thought might be worth pulling out of these kind of journeys. I would say both of them perhaps non-traditional, although maybe increasingly becoming what is the norm for ECRs. So for people listening, maybe your journey hasn't been exactly direct either. But Dea, you mentioned a few things like self-funding a PhD. I know you had a family at that time and so on. What were maybe some of the challenges and how did you kind of work around that, what you were going through?
So when I decided to do a PhD, I had, I guess, read a recent report about the levels of inequalities in the city that I live in, Manchester. Well, I live in Stockport, but anyways, Greater Manchester. Yes, thank you. And so I wanted to explore that a little bit more with my PhD. So I thought, I'll go do I wanted to explore more, I think, about that. And like you do, maybe not. You go back, went to do a PhD, but it was self-funded because obviously I'd been out of academia for so long. I didn't have access to like up-to-date articles to be able to do a proper research proposal with like recent articles or, had my hand on what was kind of the most recent discussions in the topic. Yeah. So that was a challenge in and of itself. But the supervisor I initially started working with was open, which is also quite useful in the sense that he saw beyond kind of the academic, academic kind of, he saw beyond the typical definition of academic excellence and valued my professional experience as well. So
and your abilities.
And my abilities outside of kind of the academia circles. So that was helpful. So I had to do it self-funded because I wouldn't have made the cut to be, what they call it, highly competitive for a funded PhD. But obviously I had a family at the time and, it would have been unfair to leave my husband to kind of fund the whole family. So I had a part-time job as well and my daughter was 3 years old when I started. So it was the hardest time of my life, trying to manage these three things, all of this at once. So it was full-time PhD, part-time work, being a mom, being a wife, all of that. But I managed to do it. My write-up was actually over COVID when I was homeschooling. Yeah. And I remember I had to fight... I have lovely supervisors, but I had to really fight my corner in terms of the way that I wrote and submitted my PhD in the end. So I did my PhD through, so not publications, because they were not all published.
But they call it the bespoke publication.
Publication, because that was the only way that I could survive my submission year.
That's so interesting. I did the same thing.
Oh, did you?
And also during the COVID period, I was writing up. We were probably in the same space in our little rooms doing the same thing. So
Yes, because I was like, I can't, because I'd committed. So before the COVID pandemic happened, I'd committed to writing these articles, and then I had to sort of homeschool and submit. And I was like, I can't. I was like, I physically can't. Because look at my daughters. Like, I don't know if you saw this in COVID. People had like timetables for teaching for their kids. I had a similar one. We started with Joe Wicks. I don't know if because you had a PE teacher. The PE teacher, for those that might not know. And then, all of those things. But then I had to fit in writing as well. So there was all of those challenges with kind of, I guess, my route. But what was good, and I think this is, if there was a plus side with a self-funded PhD, was halfway through when I had now familiarized myself with the different theoretical frameworks, I realized that I needed to do a different PhD. So I switched departments and schools to politics in my second year. But I was able to do that because I wasn't funded. So I didn't have the kind of the pressure, restrictions and pressure and people kind of deciding what it is that I wrote.
That's right.
So I was able to move. And that was literally through a conversation at a conference. I met my amazing supervisor. I'm going to shout her out, Professor Liz Richardson, at a conference. And I was just like, you're kind of doing the same things I want to do. Are you okay to have me as a student? And she was like, yeah, go on. And we did that. But yeah, I'll stop talking.
No, I love that. And once you become an academic, you do realize how much of it is just this kind of like, do you want to do this? Do you mind if yeah, sure, let's just do that. Because when you're starting out, and this kind of links to what you were saying, you often don't know like this perfect technique of how you're supposed to get things like funding or what you're supposed to do. I find that really interesting because you had this, what some would see as an enormous challenge of not being up to date with the literature and not knowing what to do and having to do the proposal kind of without that. But then you've also mentioned how in some ways that was freeing. And I think we can sometimes worry so much about doing it the perfect way, you kind of forget about maybe the joy of doing it your own way, maybe.
Yep.
So
I agree.
Yeah. And Bhushan, so there's something similar in the sense that you also had this route where it turned out not to be as smooth and you had some challenges. Like you came to the UK, very different culture, I imagine, and had a whole different experience. So when you encounter this, so you've given us the bare bones of what you did, but how was that? How did you navigate changing disciplines, all these kinds of things, changing into a different culture?
So changing many things, like you said, like changing countries, because we were surrounded with our close family and friends back in Istanbul, and coming to UK, London. My husband immediately started his job. We put our daughter to nursery, and I was like, okay, I've been to museums and everything. London is a beautiful city, but okay, what? What I'm going to do now? So, and not getting any replies from my job applications, I realized there is something going on that I need to do something. So I tried to find different paths. For instance, I continued collaborating with my PhD supervisor and her team. They were at that
You kept
time
in contact.
Yeah, I kept in contact, and like I started this master's program, and I really put a magnifying glass on my well-being, because this was a positive psychology program, mainly focusing on people's well-being, how people can be at their best. And this was just during the right time. I was like, how can I become my best while looking after my daughter, adapting the new culture, learning about coaching psychology, which was part of my master's, and I didn't have any background in that. I had background in sociology, then did a master's in history and society, and did my PhD in organizational psychology. And I said, okay, I really would like to focus on this well-being and want to learn about coaching. So that coaching really helped me. Like I said, I put that magnifying glass. On my well-being, I did lots of reflections. I was in touch with my PhD supervisor, and I just volunteered to collect data from UK for the cross-cultural project. And also I was collecting my own data while writing my master's, which I found really easy. I need to say that after a PhD, doing a master's was like...
So is this a top tip? We should all go and do another master's.
I think that was amazing, because I just found myself at UEL, like teaching my peers, like collaborating with them, like clarifying things.
Yeah.
And of course, people realized I already got a PhD. But it was also at a time where we had lots of difficult times during COVID. Like the time I was writing my dissertation, some of our family members back in Turkey got sick. Some of them passed away. So it was a really tough time. But still, I just persevered. I said, during this time of uncertainty, I want to something holding in my hand. It was like a second baby. Another dissertation, the third one. And I said, I will keep doing this. I'm going to produce something. I'm going to touch people's lives. I become so creative. I already knew I was good at connecting people, but during those hard times, I found different ways of connecting to people. And like finding a job, like while doing that master's, I expect to find one in the UK. But during that lockdown, my first job offer came from Turkey, from the university I got my PhD. They said, okay, everything is online now. Why don't you come and give this lecture? And I was like, really? From my
That's surreal.
I was based in London, giving some lectures back in Turkey, in my home university. And just a short time after that, the department also offered me a job at the University of East London just before I graduated. So during that tough times, I had this funny moment during my graduation day. I was there to graduate, but I was on the stage because I started my job before I graduated. So
sat as an academic on the stage.
Sitting next to my supervisor.
Yeah.
I was a student and a colleague, and they called out my name, and I said, "Oh, I'm on stage. Thank you. Celebrate us." And then I drew a little circle and just came back to my seat, and I was like, "Wow."
Nice little tour of the stage and then back to your position.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But finding those alternative ways, like being in touch with my supervisor, keep collecting data, trying to understand UK through the lens of a student first. I think that was really helpful for me because then I was able to, what is this module and what's the content? There are 3 semesters in a year. So these were all new things to me. Might seem small, but there were really big things, big changes for me. So when I started lecturing a little bit here, a little bit there, I said, I'm now getting to know people, my passion areas, and I know my values. I want to contribute to people's lives, and how can I do that? And the thing is, I didn't want to do it only through research, but I started volunteering for some NGOs, organizations. I volunteered in my daughter's school, gave workshops in Kindness Week, in Wellbeing Week. So I think all those led me to have different hats right now: a research hat, teaching hat, practitioner hat.
There's definitely something there. And again, there's something I think I picked up in your kind of narrative as well, dear. But it's really coming out here that you faced what some would think of as like these enormous obstacles of just not being able to get a foot in the door in any kind of way. But what you turned to was, well, what do I care about? What am I interested in? What's going to enrich my life in some kind of way? And Deo, in your story, sort of saying this report had just come out and I was really sort of concerned about these things in my own area. And through doing that, you ended up on a very different path to where you kind of got to. And I think that's really useful for people to hear. Too often we might have this idea we have to follow other people's narratives for our careers as an ECR and what we're doing and where we're going. But it seems like you managed to sort of incorporate what interests you and your own values and where you're going into lots of different parts of your life and doing it. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, yeah. And I can see, that connects. Yeah. Okay. And Deo, you're sort of nodding away. Yeah.
This is the podcast.
Yes. So if anybody's watching any filming of this, you will see the nodding. And I had a similar kind of experience for my own path as well, having a non-traditional route as a kind of mature student coming back to things. So we've kind of touched on some of the challenges and then how you both have turned those into these amazing opportunities through pursuing your own interests, your own values and sticking with them. Do you think there are other sort of skills and maybe strengths that each of you have brought to your career because of these different backgrounds, this interdisciplinarity, these different cultures, this having to juggle multiple things, having work experience? Maybe Deo, I'll ask you first of all.
100%. So when I was outside of academia and I worked in organizational development, and a lot of what we were talking about in terms of trying to make a better work environment for people, I've always done co-creation. It's always been with colleagues at work who, I wanted to sort of get their views and opinions. So that was an approach that I was very comfortable with. And so when I came back to do my PhD, it was natural for me to do my research like that because I didn't know anything else. And I had not been out of academia for like 8 years or whatever it was. I had not been trained to not do that, if that makes sense. Like I had my own...
In some ways, you were not trained to have bad habits.
Yes,
actually.
I think so. I genuinely think so. Yeah, I had, or maybe if I was, I'd forgotten 9 years after. Yeah. So I didn't have all of those typical, be neutral or, all this. So I had a different, I had a different approach, which was very much about co-creating knowledge with people. And so when I was doing my sort of PhD fieldwork, that was very much the approach I took, and which is why I went to sort of work with my supervisor, was because I was like, this feels normal, this feels normal to me, and it helped because I think through kind of the work I did during my PhD, I was able to get the the award for, I think, the PGR Student of the Year, precisely because I did work with communities and policymakers in the area that I was interested in. I think things like being able to manage multiple deadlines. When you, as an academic mom, you might have teaching, you might have like a student, a child's play thing in the afternoon, and you have to do a funding, you need to do some research. So you have so many different, you're working in community, so you have so many different hats. You just juggle, because I think, and obviously working outside of academia where the pace is much, much faster, you have to deliver and again, handling multiple projects. I think that brought that to the way that I work.
Are you good at meeting deadlines, there?
I am.
Amazing. So very rare for an academic.
I know. But I think it makes sense, because how can you, working outside of academia, to go back to your boss and say, oh, I'm sorry, I can't. It's just like, what? What do you mean? You make it happen. So I think I am. But what I am learning, though, I guess, and what's nice about academia is you can go back now and just be like, can we extend this, please? I have to say, it's the first time I've done it this year. I've done it.
Wow.
I know. I refuse. I'm trying to not do that, but I have done it this year. I'm like, I don't think I can handle this.
Yeah.
But I think so. It's things like being able to connect and make connections, but not in a just an instrumental way, but in a relational way. In terms of
authentic.
It's very authentic. It's also something that I've learnt outside of academia that I bring into my work. So I don't find it tricky to just email people or walk up to people and say, hey, I liked your paper, or hey, I liked this. And so my network just extends, which is a useful thing within academia. So I think all those, and the fact, the way different types of knowledges I'm able to access, because again, I wasn't trained in politics throughout. Yeah. In terms of, my undergrad was economics, for example. So I think it allows me to see the world in different places. I'm also not afraid to look to other disciplines for answers. So I don't think, I'll just look at political.
Doesn't feel odd to you to do it. It just seems
I'm just
normal.
like, who's explaining things in the way that makes sense? Okay. And then I'll use that. So, and I think that's part of everything that I've done before.
So there's quite a few strengths, and if we were to try and list them all, and I won't go through a complete list of them, but effectively, by not being sort of inculcated in a particular way of doing things, you just did things the way you thought made sense, and that's actually allowed you to flourish and thrive in your academic work. You've been able to flourish with doing these things, and it just leads you down different pathways. So these things, again, that sometimes can feel like, I don't know how it works, I don't know the system, there can be advantages to that.
You can carve your path.
Yeah, you can carve your path, and
don't be afraid to do it.
Bushin, so the same kind of thing to you. What do you think there were some things that you just kind of did, or that you brought to your studies or the second masters, and what came after it, and how you approach things because of having these differences in cultural background, because of a bit of interdisciplinarity?
First of all, I was one of the youngest people in the room when I first went to on-campus teaching.
This is for the...
And because all my students are mature students, this is a master's program, people already start their businesses, have established their careers. They want to learn something new, improve their well-being, also the well-being of their organizations, other peoples around them, in maybe educational institutions. So lots of people are... These coming from this diverse background, from all walks of life, and they are mature students. So I was maybe the youngest one in the room.
So you were actually the youngest and the second masters, and meeting people from different backgrounds.
Exactly.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, I'm bringing lots of different background, like not only my collectivistic values and experiences from Turkey, but also from these different disciplines like sociology, history, and psychology. I think one striking thing when I was answering the questions of my students was that I was able to give examples from different disciplines. Just like Deo said, like I was given an example from a macro perspective in economics. I was given an example about some of the cycles and trends from an historical point of view, or I was able to focus on micro level at the psychological well-being area, but also bringing the collective, the non-Western way of thinking and values and everything from a sociological point of view. So I think that was one of the positive things I brought to my teaching and my interaction with my students. And I wanted to put a lot of emphasis on critical perspective. I think my cultural background has just prepared me to question things in research, in academia, in our daily lives. So I was asking more questions than my students. I was asking them, so let's discuss together. And that co-creation also resonated a lot with me. I think I was already co-creating the module, the content, revising, revamping it to a wide extent with my students, because my students got these amazing diverse backgrounds. And so yeah, co-creating brought these lots of critical perspective, like why we do this, why we do that. And all my data collections or compilation of these lists of readings for my students included these diverse perspectives, not only from different disciplines, but also from different cultures. And the samples that I chose for my data, for instance, reflect that as well. I was trying to find the ones who were under-researched. So asking those research questions and building up the content with my students improved my critical perspective. And I think my cultural background, trying to compare and contrast and see some similarities, but also differences across these different cultures and backgrounds and experiences, I think helped me find a different path.
So again, there's this idea that actually not feeling constrained by a certain way of doing things just automatically led you to think in a different way and to just ask questions maybe that other people weren't asking. And I think that is worth all of us thinking about, because we all bring a distinct kind of situated perspective to being an ECR. We all have different paths and we all have different ways that we got here. Even people who might look like the so-called traditional route of going through. And I don't know, would it be fair to say, would both of you say, like, listen to yourself a little bit in this journey?
And I think, there's something about being an ECR and new to the field or to the topic that you're interested in. And I think you touched on it, is keeping your sense of questioning. I think is super important. I think keeping that sense of, okay, I'm being taught all of these things, I'm reading all of these things, but why? Like, to what end? And I think keeping
where are you going?
Where am I going with it? Why am I engaging with this research in this way, or these like body of work in this way, or canonical texts? So just keep that questioning. I think is something that we have the privilege of as ECRs, actually, to then decide, okay, how am I going to make my way through this? And, bringing with us that situated knowledge that you referred to.
And that's what it is to be an ECR in many ways, to be trying to forge your way through this and hold on to what you bring to the field and maybe beyond the field, actually. So you might have impacts beyond that as well, as it sounds like both of you have had.
I attended a workshop by British Academy, which was called Finding Your Voice. That helped me quite a lot, because finding your voice as a researcher, as a person, as a mom, as a sibling, as finding your voice, hearing your own voice aloud, talking about your research to a group of strangers, so to say, that workshop helped me a lot. And I think trying to find these different paths, connecting different dots, was one of the skills I brought. And being part of these different networks was another path I took, I believe, like becoming a member of this ECRN in the British Academy, or joining the community of practice groups of some of the associations in my field, also outside my field, reading the books of Nobel Prize winners, for instance, or finding some poets, Irish poets, and reading their poems, like doing something.
Stay curious and interested.
Really feeds me, like it enriches my intellectual knowledge, my academic knowledge, contributing to all my relationship. And I think it's all about creating that identity that we've been talking about. Becoming yourself, hearing yourself, but also hearing others and seeing the wider world.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you might not always know exactly what your voice is or where you're going. And Dea, I wanted to ask you if you could remember the phrase that you used. We had a brief chat before, and you said something about weaving tapestry, but not knowing
yes.
what was that again?
Yeah, so I think I was saying that looking back, as we were talking about my route into my PhD, and I was saying how all my different degrees were, I guess, not related and not obviously related. And so, there was a tapestry of my life, if you like, being woven. And when you look at a tapestry from behind, you can see all the patterns, but it doesn't necessarily make sense. Mm-hmm. But I'm not saying tapestry of my life is finished, because I'm still living.
Touch wood.
But, I can start to see the pattern and the connections, because when you turn the tapestry around, you can start to figure out what it is the person is trying to do. So with my different kind of things that I've been part of, they're all connected in the way that they make me see how, they make me see how we can, work towards racial equity in policy and public services.
Yeah, and that really resonates. It might resonate with other people who are listening. And I think the same when I think about class and all the things that I'm interested in. It's this idea you might not know where it's going. Then maybe turn the tapestry, maybe go to a workshop on finding your voice and think, oh, this is actually who I am. This is where it fits. One thing I wanted to ask both of you about, because you've had these non-traditional routes through and had all these different experiences, you've both got quite active LinkedIn presences, sort of social media presences. And I wanted to ask you about that, because I think for a lot of people who are listening to this, like the idea of promoting yourself on social media can feel a bit uncomfortable. Maybe some people not. Maybe it's supernatural. I know I've sort of struggled with what the role of that is. Do you use your LinkedIn profiles in some way as part of it being an ECR?
I think it's part of creating that identity and connecting people. In my case, like I mentioned, having that student lens, first of all, then having that staff lens at the University of East London, LinkedIn was sort of making that bridge between my current students, past students, the staff members, my colleagues. So it started like that. And also I started volunteering for a charity in Turkey very recently. And teaching in English in the UK is nice, but also giving some messages, supporting people in my home country, in my native language was also something very important for me.
Just keeping up.
So through LinkedIn, I was able to now connect my Turkish students with my other network here in the UK. They were able to see what I'm doing in my academic world, but also in my social world, the conference presentations, the data collections, some of the most up-to-date research in the field, which might contribute to many people. And also when something harsh happens in the world, I was also giving my voice over there as well. Like when earthquakes happened in Turkey and the close area, I was able to shout out for help and to bring people together through my profile. So I think I'm using that LinkedIn per se to establish and improve my connections with people around the world.
And to help connect various people to one another. So
exactly.
You're bringing together.
I think I'm good at bringing people together. I'm really a good connector. So far, I connected lots of people.
So you are a natural connector, and basically LinkedIn has kind of helped you sort of bring all that together.
Yeah, way of having my relationships, nourishing my relationships, being in touch with people.
Yeah.
And also the other thing, apart from connection, it was over time, I'm still an ECR, but I'm feeling much more comfortable asking people to do let's do this, let's do that. I want to be part of this. Why don't you come and visit my lecture, be a guest lecturer, etc. So I'm really very comfortable at the moment because I think I improved my muscle of getting stepping out of my comfort zone quite a lot of times. And now I'm feeling much comfortable. So even if I don't know a person very closely, but just being having lots of common friends on LinkedIn, I just connect and say hi and introduce myself.
The way through
I'm
that.
interested in your work, so let's do this, let's do that. So LinkedIn I think is a nice opportunity for connections.
Yeah, and so obviously it's not just LinkedIn we could be using, but it's sort of increasingly one that I'm seeing academics start to take more of an interest in. And Deo, you also use your platform.
So I remember when I finished my PhD, or at least during my PhD, we were told specifically as part of preparing for afterlife, but after PhD, that we needed to kind of have a social media presence, right? So I went on Twitter, as it was called at the time, and I absolutely loved it. Followed so many really interesting, engaging Black academics, and also just inspiring me, Black activists. It was a great space. And then Mr. Musk took over and basically left.
Space.
Yeah, and so I'm not as active anymore on X, but I was able to kind of get lots of use from X. I moved on to, so I'd always had LinkedIn because of my professional thing. So actually, sometimes I wonder what my professional contacts think about my current.
I have those too. Yes, yeah. You have a famous career, and
I'm like, I don't know,
what's she doing?
Yeah, exactly. It's a complete turn to what she was doing. But anyways, they're still there. I don't think they've unfriended me or whatever the word is on LinkedIn. But LinkedIn actually has been interesting because I've always had it, but I never used it as a scholarly intervention until I guess the mass exodus from X. And then lots of academics have moved on there as well. So I think it's really interesting for me anyway, because I span community policy and academia. So all three of those communities are on my LinkedIn. And what's really useful with that, unlike X, when you have to have multiple threads, I can just do a post, like a long post, long reflection. So I don't tend to do, I will say I have this paper out and things like that, but I hopefully tend to do more around amplifying other people's work, amplifying conversation.
Yes.
Doing a lot of reflexive posts, connecting it to kind of real world events of what's happening, what I'm seeing in the world. I did try and start a group on LinkedIn because I run the Racial Equity and Policy Network, which is for policymakers interested in racial justice and racial equity. So I did try to create a group on LinkedIn for that kind of population. I have to say I failed massively at that. Because I wanted it to be engaging. I wanted people to engage with each other. Yeah. But it ended up with me just posting. And I just thought actually, rather than stressing myself out with I had reminders to post things on. It was just so stressful. And I thought, actually, that's not my way of engaging with social media. So I just moved to more reflexive posts. So whoever wanted to engage would engage. Yeah. But that's my experience.
That's super interesting because actually, again, I'm getting a commonality from both of you, but what's coming out is, you maybe try to do what people might think of as, this is the correct way to network on social media. I will create a group and we will do things. And that doesn't really work out. But what you have sort of had success in this very broad sense is using it authentically to connect people, to amplify voices, and to, again, stay true to this, why am I doing this kind of thing, rather than just, everybody, I have posted a paper. Yeah. Ta-da! Which I think for many people in academia, it can feel a little bit inauthentic maybe, and maybe not what you got into the research to do. But for both of you, it feels like just an extension of your natural professional identities to be doing it, which I think is really, really useful to hear. And I will be considering what you said for myself. and making more use for myself. So I think we're just sort of about ready to sort of wrap this up. But I wanted to ask you both before we finished, if there was one thing that you could say to people from your vast experience, maybe what advice would you give to early career research in terms of maybe understanding their identity as an ECR and maybe pursuing their path? So I'll start with you, Ushin, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think doing reflections, like thinking about what am I doing, what I'd like to do, what's going on in the world, like those little pockets of time to do your reflections is key. To set your goals, to revise your goals, or just do nothing, just give a break and just stand still. So I think those reflections were so important for me. And also, And also the thing I just said about stepping out of your comfort zone, see it as a muscle. You will get nice muscles when you practice that, and believe me, it's going to be really easier next time you step out of your comfort zone.
So basically, create these pockets of time for reflection and develop the muscles, and the things will become easier and more natural.
Yeah. Don't hesitate to connect to people, get support, ask for help.
Yeah.
I think I was a bit uncomfortable at first shouting out for help, like saying somebody, I can't find a job. I don't even get a response of no. Like even seeing that would have made me feel much better. But over time, I was able to ask for help, tell about these challenges and everything openly. So yeah. Maybe you shouldn't hesitate to ask for help.
Okay, so there's some good bits of advice there from Bhushan. Dave, what's your, here's what I want to...
Yeah, so, I mean, really interesting. Like, we didn't plan, but I would have sort of talked about some of the things that she talked about. So I think in addition, I would say is don't be afraid to carve your own path. I think that is, if there's one thing from my own experience, I think that's the big thing. I think, reflect on what kind of academic do I want to be relational and, be human, connect authentically. So all the things that Bhushan said. And then just don't be afraid. Like, yeah, you might fail, like, with my LinkedIn group, you might be unsuccessful. I mean, I left academia for a bit before I came back. So just, but be very clear on kind of what kind of academic do I want to be, and then just carve your path. Brilliant. Be open to failure, learn from it, and
keep going, because that's what's going to keep you going through the journey, isn't it? Yeah. Staying true to your own path in some ways. Friends, we didn't mention friends, but have some friends. Yeah. You must put that on the list.
Outside of academia.
You must put that on the list. That, I think that will come up on other episodes of the podcast as well. Thank you so much both for a wonderful conversation. Thank you for listening to Confessions of an Early Career Researcher. I've been your host, Leonie Smith. This podcast was brought to you by the British Academy in collaboration with the Leverhulme Trust.